Dear audience, we have started our live streaming.
Momita, I just had a conversation with Basabi and she is about to join.
Thank you.
Welcome.
second wave feminist movement. That is during the late 60s or the beginning of the 70s. Feminist thinkers and feminist theories tried their best to tweak feminist research and for the same research they also they are in favor of using advanced methods. But many feminists have rejected quantitative methods of data collection and also analysis because, according to these feminists, though these measures doesn't have a scientific status, it is mainly androcentric in nature. And again, some feminists argue that feminist research will research by men, by women, sorry, women and women. And in this context, I would like to mention the thinking of Sandra Harding, one of the experimental standpoint epistemology standpoint theory, which is a very popular theorist. In 1987, Sandra Harding holds that it is through the method of research that makes feminist research significant, whereas that mainstream research cannot. There are some significant points which she mentioned, like number one, the method quality of work. That is, pressure of scientists that are of concern to women rather than men. Secondly, the alternative explanatory hypotheses which are developed and the evidence that is used. She deliberately used the explanatory hypothesis, this term, because we know that the explanatory hypothesis is such type of a hypothesis which could be manipulated by an researcher in any type of research work. And thirdly, the purpose of inquiry. So, in order to facilitate an understanding of women's views of the world and to play role in women's emancipation or liberty. And lastly or fourthly, the nature of the relationship. It is a very important point to be noted. The nature of the relationship between the researcher and the researched or the subjects of the inquiry. So my presentation is divided into four subtopics. What is feminist research? Secondly, feminist as critique of mainstream or mainstream research. Thirdly, feminist epistemologies. And fourthly, the various research tools used by the feminist researchers. So now the second point, it is the feminist as critique of mainstream research. So this is also a very important point to note that the feminist, they uttered the very word, the mainstream, not mainstream, because according to them, mainstream research is undoubtedly a mainstream research, because here we find an androcentric tendency. And I have mentioned earlier that feminist method is an emerging discourse. But here I would like to add another two terms, that it is an emerging discourse with a radical outlook. So feminists always are against the conventional social science research, which according to them is the mainstream research, and they are called, I have mentioned that it is called by them as mainstream research. And according to them, existing mode of social science research, the body of knowledge, work within patriarchal and androcentric ideology, which help to sustain and support the continuing subjection or subjugation of women. So, women issues have been addressed in their research problems in the following ways, according to the feminist. Number one, research findings based on generally based on all male samples and that are generalized to the whole of the population. Secondly, when women are incorporated in research, they are often presented in a stereotyped way or in a distorted way. Thirdly, there has been also the tendency to present men and masculinity as the norms, and when women do not conform to to these norms of masculinity, they are presented as deviant. So, in this connection, I would like to mention the name of the eminent German sociologist George Simmel, who also became surprised to observe that how women have been labeled as deviant when they are not conforming to the existing norms of the society. That is, the existing norms means the masculine norms. And fourthly, researchers have also used those studies to serve the purpose of the research rather than to meet the needs and aspirations of the researched. And lastly, I would like to say that there is a gap the um, between the researcher and the research, which is not at all accepted by the feminist thinkers. And now here I would like to mention the name of the famous American sociologist Sulamit Reinhardt. In 1983, Reinhardt called such type of research as rape. And according to Reinhardt, conducted on a rape model, I am quoting, is conducted on a rape model, the researchers take heat and run. They intrude into their subjects' privacy, disrupt their perceptions, utilize false pretenses, manipulate the relationship, and give little or nothing in return. So, when the needs of the researchers are satisfied, they break up contact with the subjects or the researched. And in the beginning of my discussion, I have mentioned about the dichotomies of the research methods in the quantitative and qualitative forms. And according to the feminist, quantitative methods is associated with positivism, objectivity, and so positivism fails to understand the significance of the social context or the context of the social world, and to also they fail to realize the question raised by various women's in the larger society. So these feminists are also against the use of numbers to prove facts. They are critical of the methods, methodologies, and epistemologies of quantitative research. And they also criticize the selection of sexist and elitist research topics. They are critical of biased research design, including overuse of male only respondents. They are also critical of exploitative relationship because here we find between researcher and researched. They are also very critical of false objectivity in and inaccurate interpretation and over generalization of findings. And now, coming to the next point, that is the feminist epistemologies. actually feminist, what is the meaning of the epistemology? Epistemology means the theory of knowledge. And when we are talking of feminist epistemology, we should keep in mind that feminists point to the need to distinguish between methods, methodology, and epistemologies. We know very well what is method. Methods are the techniques for gathering data or evidences for research, and methodologies are the theories of how research should proceed in its own way. And epistemology, which I mentioned that it is a theory of knowledge, it defines what counts as an adequate theory and how research findings can be judged. What makes the findings of one piece of research more adequate than the findings of other research in the same area? The question of epistemology raises the issue of who the knower, that is the researcher, who the knower can be, what test of belief something must pass to count as legitimate knowledge. In feminist epistemology, feminists have made a significant contribution to understand the connection between power and knowledge. And in particular, they have pointed out that the recognition of knowledge claims, the recognition of knowledge claims is necessarily tied to relations of domination and exclusion in the society. We know that there are many strands of feminist theories like liberal feminism, Marxist feminism, socialist feminism, radical feminism, postmodern feminism, ecofeminism, cultural feminism, etc., etc. So there are also a number of epistemological stances which have been adopted in order to provide the basis of feminist truth claims. And it, as said by feminist theorists like Liz Stanley and Sue Wise in 1993. And now, coming to the next point, I can say that the feminist research method, which is based on feminist epistemology, it has five important characteristics or traits. Number one, feminist research should be based on women sample. Number two, using the experiences of women, feminist research intends to build a research design which could cater to the needs of the women. Number three, the relation between the researcher and the research is not the relation of domination or subjugation or the superordination and subordination. So here, power relation is irrelevant. And number four, feminist research also intends to provide women with the information which will help them to know their surroundings, that is and also to make them aware about the social world. And number five, feminist researchers have accepted the notion of subjectivity. It's a very important point, subjectivity instead of objectivity. Now, following the views of the Stanley and Wise, the two feminist thinkers, five broad principles have been presented here in considering the feminist epistemologies. According to them, while there is a range of feminist epistemologies, in practice, these shade into each other in the in the research. Secondly, different feminist epistemological positions sometimes disagree over the basis of knowledge. Disagree over the basis of knowledge. who generates it, and under what condition or under what circumstance. Number three, feminist researchers often combine elements of a number of epistemological positions within their work. And this indicates not only that we can work within contradictions, but that either we do not think carefully through the basis of what we do and what we claim for it. Or alternately, it can be said that we do think it through, but we choose to work with contradictory elements because this is what social reality is like. Fourthly, or number four, there is no, according to them, there is no true feminist epistemology. Each can be seen to be sensible and plausible given the purposes and project of those who hold it. And number five, we can challenge and we can question other positions, but that we should have mutual respect for different feminisms and recognize the value of the diversities. Now, coming to the typology of feminist epistemologies, I must say that feminist epistemologies are of five types. Number one, feminist empiricism. Number two, feminist standpoint epistemology, or you can say feminist standpoint theory. Feminist constructivism. Number four, postmodern feminist epistemology. And number five, epistemic communities. So, coming to the first point, that is the feminist empiricism, we can say that feminist empiricism is critical of mainstream research because this type of research in social science, it is mainly male centric, and feminist empiricists suggest that feminists are more likely to produce adequate knowledge because they include women and women's experiences in their research as central and normal rather than as deviant or marginal. So, empiricists want to correct the bias in our knowledge about men and women, and in also relations of the sexual differences, and they try to ensure the reality of the lives of the men and women both. And the logical goal of this perspective is that the development of the non sexist research, and here I would like to refer Margaret Eichler. In 1988, Eichler holds that non sexist research should eliminate sexism in titles, sexism in language, number three, sexist concepts, sexism in research design, number five, sexism in methods, number six, sexism in data interpretation, and number seven, sexism in policy evaluation. So I'd like to elaborate it. That is the what is sexism in titles. And that is, for example, when we are studying on the migrant workers, then we could mention whether I am going to work on migrant women workers or migrant male workers. And secondly, sexism in language. Here, Eichler holds that language should be used which makes it clear whether men or women or both, men and women both, are being addressed or referred to. And sexist concept, number three, for example, defining class by referring to the occupation of the head or the household. Number four, sexism in research designs. Here, Eichler holds that men and women are both included in the research where there is relevance. Number five, sexism in methods. Here, Eichler does not express her view regarding the sexism in methods, because we know that the feminist thinkers or theorists since a long time are in favor of using the feminist method instead of the androcentric mainstream research method. And number six, sexism in data interpretation. We know that it is a very important part of the research, that is the data interpretation or data analysis. The interpretation of data according to Eichler, that should be from the perspective or the just of men or just of women, either from the perspective of men or perspective of women. And lastly, sexism in policy evaluation. It is very important to know that in case of the research, we know that it has been said in academics that all research should be policy oriented. So, sexism in policy evaluation, Eichler hold that so that policies that serve the needs of both men and women are advocated in the research. And now, coming to the next point, it can be said that though some feminists are in accord with the views of the Eichler, but many feminists argues that what Eichler says is not at all sufficient because they would rejected the positivistic stance that underlies her preoccupation with non-sexist methods, arguing that given the power relations that exist in our society in different phases of our society, we know very well, and such research practices would continue to be male dominated and meet the needs of men rather than that of women. And now the second type of epistemology, which is, I think, the most important among the five typologies of epistemologies, that is the feminist standpoint epistemology. But in feminist research method, generally, it has been considered as or named as feminist standpoint theory. And the terms standpoint refers coined by feminist theorist Sandra Harding. And during the second wave feminist movement, that is during the late 1960s or the early 1970s, it has influenced a number of feminist thinkers, and it has been the focus of ongoing debates within feminism, academic feminism discourse, or in the various studies related to feminism. And now you can say that standpoint epistemology, it holds that the production of knowledge is a politically engaged activity. Please, note it that it is called a politically engaged activity. Why? Because mainstream researchers have often refused to acknowledge this, but it is a problem which feminist research have confronted. They want to reject the view that all knowledge is equally valid and to argue that it is essential to be able to justify some research findings as more adequate or more accurate than others. And standpoint epistemology, it claimed that epistemology claims that their research is more preferable. Why? Because it originates in and is tested against a more complete and less distorted kind of experience than mainstream social science research. we know that human activity is structured for and experienced differently by men and women in the society, because the latter, that means the women, are subordinated or subjugated in various walks of the life. And in the words of Dorothy Smith, we know Dorothy Smith, a Canadian sociologist and a renowned feminist sociologist also, in 1987, she comments that the, they have a wider angle of view because they can be they can see or observe things from the perspective of not only the privileged, which means men, but also from the perspective of the oppressed, which means women. So there is an important claim to power here, that is the power of knowledge and the power to claim not any distorted knowledge or partial knowledge, but true knowledge. So knowledge production is considered as a political process, with some knowledge claim being seen as superior to others. And here we can refer Jean-Jacques Rousseau, whose name is associated with the French Revolution, and Rousseau is a noted French philosopher and theorist. According to Rousseau, the women should not be eligible to take part in the activities of the public sphere because they are less intelligent, and they are always being engaged in mundane activities of the household, like the giving birth to children and nurturing them and giving services to the other members of the family. So they are not at all eligible to take part in the activities of the public sphere. So that tradition is going on till now. And now, coming to the next point, we can say that standpoint epistemology claim that men's knowledge can never be complete. The oppressed could speak, as said by Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. Subaltern can speak. So here I would like to say that the oppressed could speak, could see more, and they also acquire knowledge through their struggle against subjugation, against subordination. And we know that their struggle is basically against men. So, feminist standpoint, what is feminist standpoint epistemology? It is better to say that feminist epistemology, standpoint epistemology or standpoint theory is an achievement. It is also a perspective because it is a portrayal of social life from the viewpoint of activity which produces women's social experiences, not from the partial perspective emerged from the ruling gender experiences of men. That is why I have told earlier that among these, the five typologies of feminist epistemologies, the standpoint epistemology is undoubtedly an important one. But there are differences of opinion regarding the standpoint epistemology. And here I would like to refer Patricia Hill Collins, an strong advocate of this epistemology. Actually, the term standpoint, I say that it's coined by Sandra Harding, but later it was developed by Dorothy Smith and Patricia Hill Collins. But Patricia Hill Collins, being an advocate of this type of epistemology, argued that black women's standpoint is different from white women's standpoint. And she also adds that black women have a wider angle of vision because they have to face deprivation, they have to face oppression, exploitation in many ways in their life. And now, the third type of feminist epistemology, that is Feminist constructivism. Feminist constructivism challenges the foundation of both standpoint epistemology and positivism. And it holds that the social world is constructed and shaped by the members of the society. We know it very well. And they reject the claim that there is a true knowledge which certifies some feminist knowledge as better than and superior to other feminist or non feminist knowledge. And in rejecting the standpoint epistemology, the feminist constructivists hold that there cannot be a feminist science and that academic feminists who advocate the standpoint epistemology or standpoint theory are only trying to set up a truth. Theories like Lee Stanley and Sue Wise, I have mentioned their names earlier, they argue that all knowledge is a product of the social experiences. And they further argue for a position which they describe as fracture foundationalism. Which, what is fracture foundationalism? They try to emphasize that judgments about the social reality are always relative to the content within which such knowledge is produced. It is a very important point to note that they call it a fracture foundationalism because they think that the judgment about the social reality it's always relative to the content within which such knowledge is produced. And this perspective holds that researchers are not at all intellectually superior to the respondents and they have the responsibility of producing reflexive accounts of both their research process and research findings. Moreover, this perspective is critical of mainstream or mainstream conventional research because of its claim to objectivity. The feminist constructivists argue that feminist researchers have to be genuinely reflexive as women are bias of feminist knowledge. And now coming to the, the fourth type of feminist epistemology, it can be said that this approach, that is postmodern epistemology, is derived largely from the French philosopher Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault's idea, and that power and knowledge are inseparable. We know that Foucault stated in his famous book, The Archaeology of Knowledge, that power and knowledge are inseparable. And this postmodern feminist epistemology is holds that reality is socially constructed and it's shaped by the existence of not one truth but multiple truths which cannot be explained with reference to any single meta narratives. I think that all the students are acquainted with the word meta narratives. Meta narrative means a narrative account that explore the idea of storytelling, often drawing the attention to its own creations or own making. So here I would like to say that feminist postmodern epistemology, it holds that I have mentioned, I am repeating the point that reality is socially constructed and and also shaped by the existence of not one truth but multiple truths which cannot be explained with reference to any single meta narrative. And according to this perspective, reality is in fact largely the outcome of discourse and is shaped by the interrelation between the power, knowledge, and also language. The role of feminist epistemology from the postmodern perspective is to reveal the ways in which men have defined and described the social world as they observe and as they experience. So here I would like to refer the name of the Carol Smart, another proponent of this perspective. Smart argues that feminist needs to take account of the relationship between the power, knowledge, not language. She mentions that the relationship, the account of the relationship between power, knowledge, and law. Because, according to Carol Smart, acknowledging the existence of multiple truths in the society, it could serve as an important political strategy for feminists, and taking the examples of rape, she suggests that there could be multiple accounts of rape other than the legal one. And now, coming to the next point, I would like to refer Lucy Irigaray. She is also a renowned French feminist. Irigaray argues that men could conceal and rationalize their domination by claiming that their interests and views are universal and also neutral. Their interests and views are universal and as well as neutral. She argues that it is possible only because universal claims to truth are grounded in cultural processes that correlate men's way of knowing with the mind and women with body and instinct. And now I would like to refer Donna Haraway. Donna Haraway is another postmodern feminist, and her theory of situated knowledge is very important in this context. Haraway holds that knowledge should be placed in context, and this creates a more limited range of knowledge than theoretical objectivity, which is the we know that which is the outcome of the positivism, but it is richer. It may be limited, but it is richer in allowing for exchange of understanding between individual experiences. Haraway also shows how postmodern feminism recognizes positivism as an inherently oppressive ideology, where science rhetoric of truth was used to undermine the marginalized people's agency. Of course, women. And so positivism has been recognized by the postmodern feminist as contrary to this postmodern feminist thought. So, lastly, in this point, it can be stated that according to the postmodern epistemology, there is no such thing as the category of women, no such thing as a stable, coherent self, no such thing as the institution of patriarchy. So, the aim of such epistemology, that is the postmodern feminist epistemology, is to establish feminist truth, but deconstructing truth, because the postmodernists always have faith in the notion of deconstruction, and they hold that knowledge is also part of power. And now the fifth point, that is a that is also a significant one, called epistemic communities. We are acquainted, those who are um, studying women's studies, or we are doing research on various issues of the um, um, various issues of women. We are acquainted with the term like the postmodern feminism, or the social constructivism, or the feminist empiricism, and also, of course, the standpoint theory. But It is, I think, it is a new one, that is the epistemic community, and bringing together the elements of the both the standpoint theory or the standpoint epistemology and the postmodern feminism. Some feminists like Alison Assister in 1996 have developed the idea that there is not one standpoint, but many standpoints. And a sister holds that what locates women in a shared epistemological standpoint is not a homogeneous identity, not a homogeneous identity, it may be social or it may be any social position, but a shared political interest like emancipation, like development, or nowadays we are very much acquainted with the term empowerment. So it is according to Assister, this epistemological standpoint is not a homogeneous identity, but a shared political interest like emancipation, development, or empowerment. And Assister also considers it not a women's standpoint, but a feminist standpoint because she considers it as an epistemic community which is bound by shared political interest across the country or throughout the globe. And now I would like to refer Uma Narayan, an eminent feminist thinker. In 1989, Uma Narayan called it, that is the epistemic communities, that is the epistemological implication of global power relations. In women's studies, we are often talking of the global sisterhood. So here in feminist epistemology, we also are able to listen the view of the feminist thinker like the Alison Assister or Uma Narayan, who are talking of the epistemological implications of the global power relations, or assisters emphasize on the epistemic communities and which bound together by shared political interest across the country or throughout the globe. And now this is the last part of my discussion, that is the research tools used by the feminist researchers. This is a very important part of my discussion, because when we are talking of the feminist research methods, we should mention the research tools used by the feminist research methods. I have mentioned earlier that the feminists usually reject quantitative research methodology of data collection and also the research findings, because they believe that quantitative research is androcentric and is very much related to the norms of the patriarchal society, and they believe that qualitative research methods, it could provide more scope for carrying out research. And research tools used by the feminist researchers are: number one, ethnography; number two, unstructured or semi-structured interview; and number three, focus group. Number one, ethnography. We know that ethnography is a very important method used by the, mainly in the qualitative research method, and mainly by the anthropologists, and mainly by the, better to say, by cultural anthropologists. And then what is ethnography? Ethnography is such a method used by the feminist researchers which requires the complete immersion of the researcher in the everyday life of the people who are the subject of his or her study. And ethnography is also a method of the social research which involves examining the behavior of the researched in a given social situation. As a form of inquiry, ethnography relies mainly on participant observation, on the researcher participating in the setting or with the women being studied in the research, at least in some marginal role, and seeking to document in detail patterns of the social interaction or social behavior, and to understand these in their local context. And it is apt to mention here that ethnography had its origin in social and cultural anthropology, as I've already mentioned. Um, uh, and seeking to document in detail patterns of the social interaction or social behavior, and to understand these in their local context. And it is apt to mention here that ethnography had its origin in social and cultural anthropology, as we've already mentioned. The pioneering work of British anthropologist B. Malinowski and American anthropologist Margaret Mead, whose first fieldwork was conducted in the early 1925. And it has been found from many studies so far conducted that many ethnographers reside in the field for a long time and to the greatest extent possible, participating in the everyday life of the people, while at the same time maintaining an observer's objective detachment. And ethnographic studies once were limited to only small primitive sites. That is in the in the late 19th century or early 20th century. Ethnographers reside in the field for a long time and to the greatest extent possible, participating in the everyday life of the people, while at the same time maintaining an observer's objective detachment. And ethnographic studies once were limited to only small primitive sites. That is in the in the late 19th century. Method helps a researcher to construct the women's perspective by observing women from women's gaze, not from male gaze, but from female or women's gaze. And it would also present a better scenario of the women's lived experiences in the social setting. And now the second research tool used by the feminist researchers, that is the interview method. Interview method we know is also incorporated in the quantitative method, but it is also incorporated in qualitative research. And here interview method is to some extent different from the interview method followed in the quantitative research. And feminist researchers are more compatible with such type of interview method because here the interview method, the questionnaires are unstructured or semi-structured. So feminist researchers intend to build a relation between the interviewer and interviewee, and such relation is not hierarchical. It is not the relation of the domination or subjugation, or subordination or superordination between the two, between the researcher and the research. And such interview tends to be more informal and free flowing than a structured interview. Much like an it is like an everyday conversation, and this also allows for spontaneity and for questions to develop during the course of interview, which are based on respondents answers. So semi-structured or unstructured interview is more consistent with feminist research, and it also helps to build a connection between the researcher and the research. And now the third one, that is the focus group. Uh, Focus group is a group interview at in involving a small number of similar people or participants who have some common traits or characteristics of experiences. And generally focus group are used in market research, in communication research, to understand the better the people's reaction to services or the products. So if group members are representative of a larger population, those reactions may be expected to reflect the views of the that larger population. So focus group constitute a research method that researchers organize to collect qualitative data through interactive discussion. And I would also like to say that nowadays focus group method is also used in the research of the public health communications and also in the market research. But now focus group method is also used by the sociologist and the political scientist and feminist researcher also. Used in qualitative research, the interviews involve a group of people who are asked about their perception, about their attitudes, about their opinions, their beliefs, their views regarding many different topics. When some women, a group of women, they join in such focus group discussion, they are more likely to discuss freely about the abortion, about divorce, about the domestic violence, the dual role of women or the responsibility of the single women, etc., etc. 1 minute. In focus group discussion, better to say focus group discussion, members who have joined in this discussion are often free to talk and interact with each other. So instead of a researcher or evaluator asking group members various questions individually, focus groups use group interaction to explore and clarify participants' beliefs, opinions, and views. And here, the important thing is that the interactivity of the focus group members allow researcher to obtain qualitative data or information from the multiple participants, often making focus group a relatively expedient, convenient, and very effective research method. So researchers should keep in mind that they should select members of the focus group carefully in order to obtain useful or necessary information regarding the nature of his or her research. And feminist researchers mostly use focus group techniques because here participants' points of view are likely to be manifested more than a traditional or conventional interview setting. And this technique will give them an opportunity or an advantage to empower themselves by revealing at best their own experiences of subjugation or subordination and vulnerability in their daily life or in their family life. Now, to conclude, I would like to say that I have mentioned in the beginning of my presentation that there is an intrinsic relation between the feminist and feminist research or feminist research methods, which does speak to the experiences of women, try to understand the reality from the standpoint or from the viewpoint of women, or to ask questions that relate to women's lives, and to uncover the systematic biases and distortions in the mainstream or mainstream conventional social science research. So, uh, at the end, I would like to say that in my discussion, I have tried so far to show many ways by which feminist thinkers or feminist theories have made a important contribution into feminist knowledge and feminist research. Thank you all. Thank you for listening my lecture uh, for more than 1 hour. Thank you again, and thank you, Dishari, Moumita, Troi, the young faculties of the department for arranging such a lecture program on a very pertinent topic, that is the feminist research method. Thank you all again.
Thank you, madam, for that fascinating and highly informative lecture. May I now request our faculty, Ms. Momita Biswas, to please conduct the question and answer session. Over to you, Momita.
Thank you, Dr. Dishari Royde. Uh, thank you, Madam, for this marvelous lecture. And I personally really enjoyed this session. First, I would like to take Dishari Royde's question. So, she has asked one question: what is the importance of feminist research method in society? Is it a way to challenge sexism or bias in favor of the male sex? Madam.
Dishari, being a faculty of women's studies, and you have also you have done your PhD in women's studies, and you have long been associated with women's studies department of Calcutta University. So, I think you could realize very well what is the essentials, what is the requirement of the doing feminist research, because it is a protest against the androcentric ideology that is provided by the positivistic and objective research that was followed in the conventional social science research, which is mainly based on androcentric ideology. So this is a challenge of the feminist to look into the social world differently.
Right, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank
And
you,
any
ma'am.
other question?
Yes, ma'am. I have another question. Ma'am,
Uh,
how to view woman subject in a research in contemporary times?
I couldn't forgive. I couldn't get it.
How
What?
how to view woman subject in a research in contemporary times?
I think that the question of subjectivity in contemporary feminist research is very essential, because since a long time women have been considered as objects of research, not as subjects. So, with the passage of time, with the changing scenario, the contemporary society needs or requires the very much modern type of the research which is related to this topic which you told, that the women should be treated as subject. Because I don't know, you could remember in the post feminist period, the Spice Girl feminist, they also consider themselves as the subject, not the object, in the commercials, in the advertisement, or in the film, or in the other cultural settings. So, in post-feminist period, when women, a group of women claim that they should be treated not as object but should be subject, then in feminist research we should also concentrate on women as subjects of research, not as objects of research, I think.
Ma'am, can I add certain other questions with this particular
Okay,
one?
okay.
Yes.
If I am able to answer, then I must answer.
Yes, ma'am. As you
Because
have
I
just
am not expert of these
no,
the
no, ma'am.
feminist research methods.
You are expert in this field, and I have another question. As you have rightfully mentioned, postmodern feminist epistemology, and there you have mentioned that woman as a category has not been considered there because they are considering multiple truths, and therefore woman as category has not been there since long. So how to consider this from one angle, and also I have remembered one significant portion from Judith Butler's essay Gender Trouble, and she have focused on one term, that is feminist subject, and she has somehow deconstructed the idea. So being a researcher in contemporary times, how to see in this how to view this area?
Yes, Judith Butler's gender troubles, as you mentioned very aptly, and there she also not only mentions subject but also she considers sexuality as performative action also. So the view of the different thinkers are mainly different, as the I have talked on the typologies of the feminist epistemology. So there are differences of opinion regarding the position of women, or the women should be considered as subject or object in research, and how it is different from the conventional social science research. So there are so many differences of opinion. So postmodern thinkers, they are always try to make themselves different from the conventional thinking. So they don't think women as a category. They don't consider the institution of patriarchy. So that view is basically the view of the one section of the feminist who adhered to the ideology of the postmodernism. And you may disagree with them, I may disagree with them, but that is also called the differences, diversities of feminist theory stands, and also different epistemological stances. There are differences of opinion and also diversities. So it is up to the researcher which epistemology he or she will follow in his or her research. It is better to say her, because I know that the male are not interested in doing feminist research. Because when I was teaching in the Women's Studies Research Center in Calcutta University for about 15 or 16 years, I had been teaching there. So the center was mainly women dominated. Two or three male students joined there, and after attending few classes, it is a common tendency of the male students to leave the classrooms, or then also leave the course, because they think that what we were talking in the classroom, that we are always trying to attack them, but they do not think that it is our protest is against the system, not against any individual. uh, Male are also being very much to some extent affected by the institution of patriarchy, by the ideologies of patriarchy. Not only women, men are also being affected. So we are protesting against the system of patriarchy and the ideologies and norms and values of patriarchy. We don't think that, I don't think like the radical feminists, that the men are bourgeois and the female are, we are the proletariat. This is not my view. We always we are always trying to say that we need a world which is based on the equality, and then there will be the no gender differences and no discrimination between the men and women, and no marginalization, no exploitation, no deprivation, no oppression. Okay.
Thank you,
So
ma'am.
if you are interested in such research,
Yes.
Being a young researcher,
Yes.
you
Yes.
may proceed in your own way of research.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for this fascinating answer and for this fascinating lecture. Uh, let 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 me just check if in the YouTube session there is any other question left.
How can we set the alternatives on Nisha Chatterjee?
Yes. Yes, Anisha has a question. How can we set the alternatives for our next generations? Very interesting and apt question for from our students.
Yes, it is the duty of the present of this video stage. It is not possible for me to show the way. You have to choose your own way, and you have to proceed in your own way according to your choice, because we are living nowadays in a society which is called the global village. Uh, so the impact of the globalization, new liberal policy, structural adjustment program have impacted the impact of, sorry, I have again, I am repeating it, the globalization, consumerism, and the new liberal policy have impacted us in different ways in our life. So it is our duty, it is your duty to choose your own path and to proceed in your own way. And I always wish you to go ahead. Next generation, I think they are more conscious or more aware about their own future, about their own career, and they know very well what to do and what not to do. So I would not like to give any advice to the next generation. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Anisha has thanked you for this fascinating
But
answer.
long years back, and feminist and social anthropologist Inamti Karve stated in a conversation that oh ladies, what you are fighting for the equal rights with men, why you are not shouting for more rights? So I will advise you to shout for more rights, not for equal rights, because still now, in this globalized era, we have to face different types of marginalization, deprivation, exploitation, oppression, sexual harassment in many walks of our life. So it is our duty to decide what to do and how to do. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for this fascinating session. I think our question and answer session has ended. I would like to request Dr. Dishari Royde to conclude the session and share vote of thanks.
Thank you, Momita. First of all, on behalf of the Department of Women's Studies, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Madam Professor Anuradha Mukhopadhyay, for her consistent support and encouragement. And this is the fourth lecture series, online lecture series that has been organized by the Department of Women's Studies. A special thanks to Dr. Saidul Rahman, Registrar, Diamond Harbour Women's University, for his immense support and encouragement. Also, we would like to extend our thanks to Professor Topon Mondol, the Dean of Arts, Diamond Harbour Women's University, and Dr. Tania Chakraborty, Madam, Dean of Students Welfare, for their constant support and encouragement. That kind of motivated us to keep on organizing such kind of lectures and webinars. Finally, I would like to thank Basabi Chakraborty madam for her consent in agreeing for her consent to deliver today's keynote in that on a very pertinent topic, that is feminist research methodology. I'm sure that after this fascinating lecture, our students are going to benefit a lot, especially our third semester students who are on the verge of entering the fourth semester, because in their fourth semester they have to work on dissertation. So I'm hopeful and I'm 100% confident, madam, that your lecture will help them a lot. And I'm also sure that our students would definitely agree with me. Finally, I would like to thank the organizing team, Dr. Troy Sinha, coordinator and assistant professor, Department of Women Studies, Ms. Momita Bishwash, assistant professor, Department of Women Studies, for working relentlessly in order to make today's event a grand success. A final thanks to all our participants, our dear students, in order to make this program a super success, a grand success. Thank you all. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you all. Okay, okay. I am taking leave now. Thank you. See you again.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, definitely.